In the dead of night, a calm Texas town was about to be shattered by a tragedy so dark, so unfathomable, that it would leave the entire state questioning how such a thing could happen, in their own backyard. It wasn't just the brutal murder of a pregnant woman. No, this was far worse. This was a story of pure evil, a tale of a man who, with cold precision, killed the woman he had once promised to love, and then, just as casually, threw her helpless child off a bridge into the dark waters below. What would drive a man to commit such an unimaginable act? What twisted logic could he possibly have to justify it? And why, in the eyes of those closest to him, was this horror so utterly unsurprising? But the worst part? The real shocker? He was someone they trusted. Someone who seemed harmless. Someone they never saw coming. It was a crime that would not only haunt the victim's family but also an entire community left reeling from the unthinkable. A 2-year-old boy, a young, innocent child, taken from this world in the most brutal way imaginable. And yet, even after the dust settled, and the police investigation unfolded, the most chilling part of this story wasn't the brutality of the crime, or even the killer's eerie indifference, it was the twisted mind that led to it. His name was Jonathan Harris. A man who once smiled, who once played the part of a loving partner, who seemed so ordinary. But his darkness? That was anything but ordinary. It was the summer of 2022, in a quiet suburb just outside of Houston. A place where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. Neighbors waved to each other on their morning walks, children played in the streets, and life moved at a slow, steady pace. But it was in this small town where the unthinkable would happen, a story of betrayal, rage, and a crime that would leave no one untouched. The victim was Emily Carter, a 26-year-old woman, 7 months pregnant with a child she had dreamed of raising with the man she loved. Emily had a quiet life, one that revolved around her young son, 2-year-old Noah, and her budding future with Jonathan. She never saw it coming. No one did. But Jonathan? He was a different story. On the outside, he was the perfect boyfriend. Handsome, charming, successful, he had all the qualities that made him seem like a good man. But behind the smiles, something was brewing. And it wasn't until that fateful night that the world would discover just how deep the darkness ran. Something had snapped within Jonathan, something he had kept hidden for years. They say that rage can sometimes build quietly, unnoticed, until it explodes. And that's exactly what happened. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Emily and Jonathan had just come back from a doctor's appointment, where they learned that the baby was healthy, and everything seemed fine. But that night, something changed in Jonathan. A shift that no one could have predicted. Was it jealousy? Anger? The pressure of fatherhood? Or something far more sinister? The following morning, Emily and Noah were gone. At first, no one thought much of it. Maybe they had gone for a walk, or maybe they were just out of sight for a while. But when hours turned into days, concern grew. Emily's family began calling, searching, pleading with anyone who might have seen them. Police were called to investigate, but Jonathan's behavior raised immediate red flags. He was calm, too calm. Authorities found him in his apartment, sipping coffee like it was just another normal day. When they questioned him, he didn't seem anxious. No panic. No signs of distress. He claimed that Emily and Noah had just disappeared, but his stories didn't add up. Law enforcement started piecing things together. They found evidence that Emily had been killed, but the way she had been disposed of was chilling. Jonathan had taken the body of his girlfriend, the woman he had once loved, and discarded it like trash. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Surveillance footage from a nearby bridge told the grim story. The camera caught Jonathan driving down the highway in the early hours of the morning. His car slowed to a stop near the edge of the bridge. And that's when he threw something. No, not something, someone. His own flesh and blood. Noah, a defenseless 2-year-old child, was thrown from the bridge into the dark waters below. His tiny body fell into the depths, never to be seen again. The coldness with which Jonathan did this, so casual, so detached, sent shivers down the spines of those who would later witness the footage. The investigation had its breaks, its bumps in the road, but this was the moment it all clicked into place. The evidence was clear. The pieces were falling into place. But what motivated him? What twisted logic had led to this horrifying series of events? By the time the trial began, the entire town was on edge. How could a man do such a thing? And, worse still, how could he do it with no remorse? Jonathan's defense team tried to paint a picture of a man under immense pressure. They spoke of a troubled upbringing, of childhood trauma, and of how the pressures of impending fatherhood had caused him to snap. But none of that could explain the brutality of his actions. The prosecution didn't buy it. They described Jonathan as cold, calculating, and a man who had planned everything out in advance. They argued that this wasn't an act of rage, it was the work of someone who had planned murder, who had thought through every step. They played the footage for the court, showing Jonathan's vehicle at the bridge, showing Noah being thrown off. And for the first time, the courtroom gasped. Everyone was forced to face the brutal truth. Jonathan Harris, a man who had once been trusted by those around him, was a monster. Throughout the trial, the families of the victims, the heartbroken parents of Emily, and the anguished relatives of Noah, sat quietly, listening to every detail of the murder that had torn their lives apart. Emily's mother spoke tearfully about the joy her daughter had brought into the world, about how she had been so full of life, and how Jonathan had shattered that. As for Jonathan, he sat motionless. His face remained unreadable, his eyes distant. No signs of remorse. The jury deliberated for hours, but when the verdict came, it was clear. He was guilty on all counts. Jonathan Harris was sentenced to 100 years in prison, a sentence so long it would ensure he would never walk free again. But what about the aftermath? What about the families left behind, broken by the loss of their loved ones? And how would they find a way to move on from this horror, knowing that such evil had been so close to home? The trial was over, but the damage was done. The families of Emily and Noah were forever altered by the horror of Jonathan's actions. There was no coming back from this kind of loss. The deep, irreversible pain of losing a daughter, a sister, and a grandchild in such a brutal way left them reeling, grasping for some kind of understanding, something that could help them make sense of what had happened. Emily's mother, in an interview after the trial, shared the deep void left by her daughter's absence. She spoke about the years she would never get to see her daughter grow into motherhood, about the laughter that would never echo through her home. But more than that, she spoke about the emptiness left in her heart by the loss of Noah, a sweet boy whose life had been snuffed out before it had even begun. "I'll never understand why he did it," she said, her voice breaking. "How can a man who's supposed to protect them, love them, do something so evil?" It's not just a loss of two people, it's a loss of hope. And that feeling of hopelessness echoed throughout the community. This wasn't just a crime, it was a wake-up call for everyone who thought that something like this couldn't happen in their own backyard. It shattered the illusion that violence only happens in the dark corners of the world, far away from the everyday, quiet lives that people lead. The town of Pasadena, Texas, would never be the same again. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion, wondering if the person standing next to them was hiding a dark side. Friends and family members began questioning their own relationships, wondering if anyone they trusted could be capable of something so monstrous. But it wasn't just the families and the community who were affected. The case stirred deep conversations about domestic violence, mental health, and the warning signs that are often missed before it's too late. This was a man who had been living with dark thoughts for years, but no one saw the signs. No one could have known what was lurking beneath the surface of his seemingly perfect life. Experts who weighed in on the case noted that Jonathan's history, his childhood trauma, his violent tendencies, and his inability to express his emotions, was a powder keg waiting to explode. They warned that this crime, as horrific as it was a sad example of how unchecked mental health issues and abusive behavior can escalate into violence. The most disturbing part? That Jonathan's mind, at least according to some, wasn't as fractured as some would like to think. This wasn't a crime of passion, this was a crime of calculation. A man who had planned this out, who had decided to take not just Emily's life, but the life of an innocent child. And while Jonathan's conviction brought some measure of justice, for those left behind, justice could never undo the damage. Emily's family would never celebrate birthdays again without feeling the sharp pang of her absence. Noah's absence was felt by everyone who had known him. His smile, his laughter, the innocent joy of a child, forever gone. But for Jonathan? Justice was coming for him, but it was still too little to ever bring closure. Sentenced to 100 years behind bars, Jonathan would spend the rest of his life in a cell, his name tarnished forever. But was this enough? Could this ever be enough for a crime so horrific? There's a saying, justice is blind. But the truth is, justice doesn't heal the wounds left by a crime like this. It doesn't bring back the lost loved ones. It doesn't undo the pain. The real question that lingers after all of this is, why? Why would a man who seemed to have everything, who appeared to be so ordinary, so normal, snap in such a horrific way? What made Jonathan Harris so cold, so detached from any shred of humanity, that he could throw his own son into the dark water, and kill the woman he once claimed to love? Some say it's because of childhood trauma, growing up in an abusive home, being subjected to neglect and violence, and developing a warped view of the world. Others believe it's the pressure of impending fatherhood, the fear of responsibility and commitment that caused him to lose control. But then again, there are those who say that Jonathan never wanted to take responsibility. That he was a man who wanted control over everything, including the lives of those closest to him. What we know for sure is this: Jonathan Harris made a choice. And in that moment, he chose violence over everything else. There's another chilling thought that we have to consider: could this happen again? How many Jonathans are out there, walking among us, hiding in plain sight? How many people live with hidden rage, and how many victims have yet to realize they are living in danger? Society talks about mental health awareness, about domestic violence awareness, and about identifying warning signs. But do we really know how to protect ourselves from someone who wears a mask so well? Because this isn't just a crime story, it's a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that we can't always trust the person next to us. It's a reminder that evil can sometimes hide behind the most charming of faces. And it's a reminder that, as much as we want to believe in the good in people, sometimes the darkness can be closer than we ever thought possible. As the story of Emily and Noah comes to an end, we're left with more questions than answers. The justice system has done its part. Jonathan Harris will spend the rest of his life in prison, where he will never be free again. But the scars left by his actions? Those will never heal. Emily's family will never have the chance to see her walk down the aisle, to hold her child in her arms again. And Noah, an innocent boy, who had his whole life ahead of him, will forever be remembered as a victim of a man who should have been his protector. It's a tragic end to a story that was filled with promise, a reminder that behind every face, there may be a hidden darkness. What do you think? What could have been done to prevent this tragedy? And how do we stop it from happening again? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this. Thanks for watching. If you found this story unsettling, please share it with someone you care about. It's important to stay aware and educated on the signs of danger around us. If you're in an abusive relationship or know someone who is, reach out for help. And remember, no matter how charming someone may seem, always trust your instincts.